Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Today I have a very special guest, our Congressman Jake Ellzey. How are you, sir?
I'm great, DV. How you doing?
I'm good. I appreciate when you come on. There's a lot going on in the world, and I promised Scott that I wouldn't keep you too long. So I wanted to talk to you about what's been going on in the district before I get into world issues, if you wanted to talk on that.
Whatever you want to talk about, man. It's your show.
Well, have you had to do a lot of those? What is it? Those officer notes, and what are some of the things that's been going on in the district with your office?
Well, we've done it. We do a lot of notes, lots of congratulatory notes. I appointed some folks to the academies. We just had another young man whose father was in the Navy go to West Point. Nothing I
Oh,
could do about that. That's where he wanted to go. His dad was a nuke submariner enlisted, and he wanted to go to West Point, which I would say shows a tremendous amount of judgment. I don't know how people go on submarines anyway, but
yeah,
that is the thing that I get to do that I don't have to ask anybody's permission. And so finding the next future, the next generation of leaders, both in the military and eventually perhaps in public service, is a tremendous honor, and I get to do that without asking any co-sponsors or go through the legislative process. So that's something I love to do, and since I went to the Naval Academy, it really is important to me. So get to do a lot of that, and of course we've got some of the best caseworkers on the planet trying to find ways to help out folks in our district who need district help with anything having to do with the federal government. And also we have a grant researcher for any type of federal grants that are out there, which there are many. And she can find those if they apply to, say, first responder towns with needs as far as equipment and personnel and all kinds of opportunities for grants coming from the federal government. And while I am a strong proponent of cutting our government waste and spending less and making our federal government smaller, the money that is already out there, I think if it's available, then our District 6 constituents should have an opportunity to access that, especially when it comes to public safety.
yeah. Well, just in general, what you were saying, it's so good to get people that go in. I recently interviewed Dr. Faye with Midlothian School District, and they had a military signing day, and I recognized those kids on the show. Um, there were only a couple that made the great decision to join our great U.S. Navy, but I did congratulate the other ones, because
It's
they're
an elite
serving
group,
different.
though. It's an
It
elite
is an
group.
elite group. It is, and it's becoming harder to recruit. Definitely becoming harder to recruit. So,
Yeah.
um, right now there's a bunch of stuff, and I want to cover. So, Ukraine.
Mhm.
We've been in there a while. Recently, there was some reports that we had some troops, maybe special forces, in there. I wanted you to kind of give an update on that, and then I wanted to ask you some questions on it.
Well, we don't have any boots on the ground fighting in this war. Let's make that very clear to anybody who's listening. We have some folks out there who are helping secure the embassy. We have an embassy that's open, and most of the country is fairly safe. All the fighting is on the east side of the country. The Russians occupy 18% of Ukrainian territory, but we have a nation at war with a major power, and our embassy would require, and I think people would expect, that we not have a replay of Benghazi where we have an ambassador who gets wounded or worse. So we have special operators, and whether the leaks are true or not, it remains to be seen. I'm not on the Intel committee, so I haven't seen those documents, but I would suggest that there are probably some special operators there, and I want them there to protect our embassy personnel, the folks who have their families in Ukraine. We're not going to close down that embassy because the Russians have illegally attacked Ukraine, and having special operators there provides an extra measure of security that I think is warranted at this time.
There are concerns with it, and I wanted to ask you those questions. One of them is what we're spending. Has there been good accountability? I mean, really good accountability on where we're spending all these billions of dollars we're sending over there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're not, to be clear, 1/4 of the money that we have spent is to rebuild the weapons that we have sent over. So that a lot of that money is going back here to the United States to continue our weaponry line. And I will tell you that before I answer the question fully, I would like to say that this is pointed out that our Western powers are not ready for prime time when it comes to weapons capacity. And when I say that, I'm going to tell you that the magazine capacity, and you and I both know a magazine means the storage capability of China dwarfs ours, absolutely dwarfs ours. And we don't have an industrial base that is prepared for a war. So I think that this is pointing out that we need to build more factories for weapons that we can have in reserve in case the balloon does go up. By that, I mean, if in case there is a war, you always need to be prepared for it. Whether or not you're going to go to it or not is irrelevant. You have to have those stocks up there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a military at all. So the weapons we have, we need warheads, and we need howitzer. We need 155 millimeter howitzer shells. So that's one thing that we've learned. So we've been rebuilding those. And I went, as you probably know, to Ukraine and Poland, where the drop-off point and the transfer point is between Poland, the weapons that are going into Ukraine in Poland and Ukraine. And we have an accounting apparatus that has never been seen before in history. We have one of the big four accounting firms that is monitoring every financial transaction. And we have a group of Americans in Poland who are documenting all the serial numbers and all the barcodes, if it's higher technology, of every piece of equipment that's going into Ukraine. And at this point, not one single piece of equipment has made it to the black market. So we're doing a very good job of accounting where it is. Now, that doesn't mean some of it hasn't been destroyed in combat, because these folks are fighting really hard. But the weaponry that has gone over there is monitored at the point of entry. And we also have, of course, they have technology that would help them repair it. And so we know where that stuff is, every single piece of it, whether it's been destroyed or still in use, and none of it's made it to the black market.
Okay, so we're tracking these weapon systems. There are we nation building? Is any of these funds going to the retirement plan of Ukrainians? And I know that's
Yeah.
kind of, but
It's a great question. You're asking the questions that people see on the internet all the time, and the fact that you're asking them is important for me to address. And the answer is no. As I said, one of the big four accounting firms, I won't tell you which one, but one of the big four accounting firms in the United States is monitoring every bit of money that goes through there. And the answer is no. And I think what's interesting is that at no time in history when we have given aid to another nation that is being invaded by an enemy, and I would add an evil one. This war is no longer a war, it's a genocide. The Russians have sent anywhere from 20,000, which is the official UN number, to 200,000 Ukrainian children to Russia for re-education camps. By definition, and if you look up the definition of genocide, wiping out of one's history or their populace is genocide. And that's what the Russians are doing. And if you look back through at comments from Dmitry Medvedev, who used to be the president and now is Putin's lackey number 2, he said Ukraine shouldn't exist. This has never existed. I mean, this has happened in history, and it happened in World War II, this exact same thing. And I might add that in 1932 to 33, Stalin starved 8 million Ukrainians. So it's their idea to wipe this country off the map. Good versus evil does exist. This is freedom versus tyranny, and we want to help them win their war. This is the Western powers united against evil. We've seen this before, and we've had an opportunity in 1914 to do something about it, and then we got in the war anyway. 1938, we said we stay out of the war, we're not going to help, and then we got into the war anyway. And World War II cost 418,600 lives. I was involved in 3/4 of the war in Afghanistan, either as a veteran, as an active duty member, or as a contractor. And I'm here to tell your listeners and your viewers, war involving the United States, boots on the ground, is the last thing I want. How do you prevent that? By ensuring that the Ukrainians can beat the Russians on their own. They've already demolished 60% of Vladimir Putin's conventional warfighting capability. That's remarkable in a year. Now, what I will say is this: if we're going to help, we need to make sure that they win, not just not lose, because the American public's patience will have at some point a time at which it runs out. So let's help them win. And how can we do that? They currently have a multiple launch rocket system that has a 45 to 50 mile range on it, the weapons. We have the capacity to give them weapons that will launch from that same weapons system that will go 150 miles. If they do that, they can hit Crimea. Crimea is where the Russians invaded and took over in 2014. So that's when this war started. They can hit with 600-pound warheads with precision that area, which is where they're getting attacked from, with the Iranian drones, with the attack aircraft, and the runways there in Crimea. I would like to see us, if we're going to help them win, not just not lose. And when I went to Munich for 3 days at the Munich Security Conference, I saw France and Germany very, very happily patting themselves on the back that Ukraine hadn't fallen, but not that they were winning. And so I think when you talk about the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia has given 3% of their GDP to Ukraine for this war, because they are on the western border of Russia, and they know what Russia is capable of doing, as does Poland. So this is existential for them. And I'm so grateful we live in a country that doesn't have to deal with an existential threat on our border. Now, that's not to say that the southern border is not.
And we're going to get into that.
But I'm talking enemy forces coming after us. And so this is something we should continue to help doing, but it's got a finite time limit. And I think we should hold them accountable for where this weaponry is going. And I want Joe Biden to help them win, not lose. Because he says it's for as long as it should take. And Chairman Michael McCall from Texas, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, said, well, let's not make it last long. Let's give them what they need to win. So they want F-16s. I'm not in favor of that. I'm a fighter pilot, and I have been asking, what is the when you ask for something, you want a capability, not an airframe, not a weapon system. Not just saying F-16, F-22, whatever you want. It should have a capability, and I haven't heard that yet. But nobody's established air superiority, including Russia, because of the surface-to-air missile capacity that Ukraine has. So they've done significant damage. I want them to win. I think they will win. Imagine if somebody invaded Texas. You and I both know that the people of Texas, yeah, I saw your face. The people of Texas would say,
it's right over here.
Roger that, guns up. So they're fighting for their homeland, and this is an illegal invasion. It's the first time since UN that a permanent member of the Security Council has, without provocation, invaded another nation. But the dictators in Russia, which is what they end up being all the time, generally don't retire to a vacation home in the Panhandle of Florida. They end up going out on a slab. And I think that the Russian people and the Russian leadership probably has a finite time limit for what this is doing too. Listen, the T-80s and the most advanced tanks that Russia has, they're gone. They're pulling things out of the Korean War era in the 50s to fight this war, while we are sending them Leopards and ultimately M1 Abrams tanks from the United States. Those 50-year-old tanks aren't going to do very well against the German Leopards and our M1s. So we're waiting to see what happens in the spring offensive. Spring offensive hasn't been launched yet. And when it does, I think you'll see genuine progress. And I think the people of America should expect that there be some return on their investment in that regard. And one last thing I'll say on this, because I know you want to talk about other things, is it worth it to be the good versus evil? Does evil exist this day? I've had people ask me, how does this happen in 2023? It has always happened. There is nothing new under the sun, says Ecclesiastes 1:9. And while you and I don't understand the thought process behind invading another country without provocation because you want that land. We've never done that.
That's not what
they do. That's what they do. That's what Xi Jinping wants to do with Taiwan. That's what Vladimir Putin wants to do. That's what the Ayatollahs want to do with Israel. And that's what Kim Jong-un wants to do with Korea, which is technically still in a state. That was not a conclusion of the war. That war's not over. That's why we still have lots of troops on the border in South Korea. So this still happens, and it woke everybody up, because a lot of people thought, since you have gas lines going from Russia to Germany, that they're our friends now. They never were. They never have been, and until Putin's gone, they won't be.
Well, I had two questions real quick about that, and we'll move on. One of them is NATO finally kicking in, other than patting themselves in the back? And are we in a proxy war with Russia? I mean, I had a dad who was a Vietnam vet, and I know that you've seen Vietnam vets and how that happened. Can you speak on that?
Uh, the 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 second question is: are we in a proxy war with Russia? I think throughout history we have given or sold weapons to allies that have been used in war. I mean, Israel is a case in point where our weaponry has been used against our against their enemies, who happen to be our enemies. So I wouldn't characterize it that way, but the entire Western hemisphere is involved in this. All of even non-NATO nations are involved in this and aiding Ukraine. So I wouldn't characterize. I think this is a good versus evil, and we're letting Ukraine fight. So whatever definition you want to use, they're using our weapons. They're using German weapons, British weapons. They're using their training. The British are training them right now. Poles are training them. France and Germany, they're
doing what they do. They're doing what they do.
Okay, yeah, you said it. They're kind of patting themselves on the back that it hadn't been lost. But Germany, they made a deal with the devil. A significant portion of their natural gas for their electrical generation, and they are the largest economy in Europe. They're the largest industrial nation in Europe. Is Russian.
Right.
And the French have always taken an interesting view, different than ours, on who their allies are and how you should help them. Remind me of what the first question was.
Oh, I think that we covered right there the proxy war and the thing, and I appreciate you answering those questions on that. And I know that I was playing a lot of devil's advocates, but there's a lot of talk within our veterans community and within kind of the Republican thing. There, we're not all we don't all march to the same tune like Democrats. We actually debate each other. So
yeah, and we should, and especially and I'll go one step further on that, because you're a veteran, Navy veteran. I'm a Navy veteran, and I've lost friends in combat. I've lost friends in training, and my time in Iraq was with my colleague Morgan Luttrell, who's now District 8 from the Houston area, Woodlands. He and I were in combat together. He's a SEAL. I went on the ground with them in Iraq in 2006 and 7. The band that I wear on my wrist, Clark Schwedler, he was killed 6th of April 2007. So he died 16 years ago this month. And 3 weeks ago, the guy who got wounded on that got shot 27 times. Actually, the bullets actually hit him 11 times and then hit his armor 16 times. He had recovered. He received a Navy Cross. He had written a book 2 years ago, and then he took his own life 3 weeks ago. I know exactly what combat is. I know that it's not glorious. It is not pretty. It is terrible. It takes the lives of people who could go on and do wonderful things on earth, doctors, lawyers, the cure for whatever. I don't want boots on the ground. I don't want this war. But I will tell you this. Had our previous president been the president, we probably wouldn't be talking about Ukraine. This administration, the same people who were in the Obama administration when this invasion got started, are now pretty much in charge again, except Barack Obama is not the president. Yeah. Anthony Blinken was doing his thing as at State Department. When you show weakness, the bullies come out to play. This is schoolyard politics. 5-year-old, starting kindergarten. Some kid wants your milk money. Give me your milk money. You say no. He punches you in the face. Do you give him, do you give him your money, or do you punch him back in the face?
You punch him.
The Russians only understand strength, and Winston Churchill said that at the Iron Curtain speech in Missouri in 1946. The only thing the Russians understand is strength. If you show them weakness, they're going to punch everybody in the face.
Yeah.
I don't want boots on the ground in Ukraine, but we got boots on the ground all over the place fighting for freedom and preventing tyranny. And so we want to help Ukraine win this.
And thank you for answering those questions on Ukraine. I'm sorry if I got a little emotional, folks. I'm tired of losing brothers and sisters in arms. I'm just tired of that.
That's right.
Um,
Yep. Because,
so
because Mike Day died 3 weeks ago, but he was killed in that op.
yeah,
He died in that op. It just took him 16 years.
yeah,
And we're losing them every day. So that's top of mind, and Morgan's lost friends. Derek Van Orden's lost friends. Dan Crenshaw's lost friends.
yeah.
And all of us have different ideas about Ukraine. Dan and I and Morgan are on one side, and I'm not sure where some other people are. That's part of this debate. We don't want another American life lost ever in combat, but
Mhm.
this isn't a free ride. The life we lead, the life we're supposed to lead according to the Constitution, the government we're supposed to have, it's not a free ride, and life isn't all rainbows.
Yeah.
There's evil out there, and you have to confront it when it shows up.
So speaking about strength,
Yep.
you mentioned this, you briefly touch on it, and China's making some aggressive moves, and they all but like staged an attack on Taiwan. What they would do, a blockade, and basically starve them out. And you know combat and you know tactics more than me. You were an officer, but I could see what they were doing and what they were prepping on. What are we going to do with China? They're doing from currency. They're doing that BRICS thing. They're trying to get the world to start trading in their yuan. They're hitting us with fentanyl on the border. And we're going to talk about that hopefully. They're pushing up on Taiwan. They're hitting us through TikTok. They're getting through Huawei or whatever that is. The cell phone Huawei. They're hitting us from every kind of angle. What's going on in Washington, in Congress, to address these things?
We have a special committee that's going over doing that right now, and it is bipartisan, because people ask me a lot, is there anything bipartisan in DC? And I will tell you that China issue is bipartisan. I mean, broadly. There are only a few members at all, and I'd say there's probably 2 or 3 on both sides who don't see it as the threat that it really is. But what you described when you talked about how they're coming after us, and don't forget the theft of intellectual property, and keep in mind that over the last 50 years since Nixon went to China and opened up trade with China, that we've been paying for their military for the last 50 years through the acquisition of cheap stuff made in China.
Yeah.
Keep that in, that their entire military is built on us buying their cheap stuff.
On Walmart.
That's right. So we have to decouple from China in every way, shape, or form. And they've got 1 million Uyghurs, which is, it doesn't matter what they believe in, but the Communist Chinese Party sees them as an outcast. And they've got 1 million of them in concentration camps. Yeah. They are doing forced sterilization. You want to talk about genocide? So China's doing the same thing to a subset of their nation, that the same thing that is the Russians are doing in Ukraine. It's genocide, and people want to ignore it all they want to. The reality is, it's true. It's not false. It's true. So they're coming after us with our intellectual property. We are continue to buy things from them that pay for things. The fentanyl issue, that's all of this is asymmetric warfare.
Yes.
Really, they can't beat us on the battlefield or in the skies or on the seas yet.
But they could drug us.
They money like they're trying to.
Yeah.
So the other stuff is asymmetric warfare. So if you have 200 Americans dying every day from fentanyl, which is a poisoning, not an overdose. Fentanyl is one pill can kill. So if somebody thinks they're deliberately making it, the Mexican cartels get the chemicals from China, and they're making it look like candy and prescription drugs, so the person takes them one time, they die. Right. That's not addiction. That they're not seeing us as a customer, neither the cartels nor the Chinese. We are the enemy, and it's the number one killer for Americans age 18 to 45. So 107,000 overdose or drug-related deaths last year, 2/3 of which came from fentanyl. In World War II, we lost 305 Americans every day fighting tyranny overseas in combat. Today, we're losing 300 Americans every day to overdose, to drug-related deaths.
Right.
1/3 is overdose, 2/3 is fentanyl, which is poisoning. Right. So would you say we're at war with the cartels? And would you say that we are close to that with China? Now, the Chinese aren't bringing it across the border, but all of the chemicals are coming from Chinese. And we're the only nation that's suffering in this from fentanyl in this way. And everything that happens in China is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So
Yeah.
what I'm telling you is I'm not advocating for combat with China. I want to make that very clear to everybody. What I am advocating is if the Mexican government is unable to prevent the deaths of Americans in wartime numbers, maybe what we're not doing is not all we should be doing. And I am signed on to Dan Crenshaw's authorization of use of military force, because every problem that we have on the border is controlled by the cartels. The illegal immigration, the human trafficking of boys and girls and children and men and women for the modern day slavery of sex trade, and the fentanyl and the drugs that are poisons that are coming across our borders, killing our youth. It's time to take them out. If the Mexican government can't do it or won't do it on their own, because there is debate on whether or not they're a narco state now that is so corrupt that they can't do this. But this is our southern border. This is the security of the United States, and I take this charge very, very seriously. Municipal, state, and federal government has one primary job: protection of the citizens within that nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the federal government's not doing it right now. That's why 2024 is such an important election. But I'll say this: I interviewed both the director of the FBI today in the appropriations hearing and the director of the DEA.
Okay.
They're going after the Sinaloa cartel. They just had 28 indictments. They arrested 8 of El Chapo's closest associates, one of his children. They are running it. We know where they're doing it. It was a 32-nation operation. It's an incredible operation that they're going after him. So the whole of government kind of understands it. I want to hear it from Joe Biden's mouth that he understands that we're losing Americans in wartime numbers right now. He seems to be the only one who's not saying it. But the FBI director knows it. DEA director knows it. But I think that our Homeland Security secretary is ignoring it. So
are we close to AUMF with the cartel? And then the last question on that is, are we going to impeach Mayorkas?
Oh, I wish we would. I haven't seen any papers on impeaching. I think somebody has filed them once, but I'm a little hazy on that. We have some folks that have filed impeachment papers on several people. So I don't know. The AUMF is generating interest, certainly on the Republican side, and Dan Crenshaw and I were talking today. I think I asked that question directly. Would an AUMF help the DEA and the FBI in their mission of preventing American deaths? Neither one of them said no. And in fact, the DEA administrator pretty much said, you can watch the footage of that interview, but she pretty much said yes. And I think there might be some interest on the other side of the aisle. It's too soon to tell. This is going to take some time, but we don't have time. We need a president who's going to lead, and he's too busy doing other things.
Licking ice cream. I don't know. There's so much I want to talk to you about.
Keep going.
I promised Chris 30 minutes, but with that, when it comes to the cartels and AUMF and dealing with them, and I wanted to get that on there. But there's one thing that I want to say. I saw a video where there was a discussion about I believe it was a 10 to 12-year-old little girl who got over the border, and she was collected. She was unaccompanied.
Yep.
And she couldn't even talk. She was messed up bad.
Mm-hmm.
When they did the examination on her, she had like 25 different DNA inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible to even think about. I'm a dad of a daughter. It's horrible, but that's the kind of stuff that's happening on the southern border. How does Congress, how is Congress going to respond to things like this?
That's a good question. And what you just mentioned is true. And I watched an 8-year-old, when I was in state rep, went down to the border at night and watched a coyote bring across a family, and they get off the boat. So I was actually standing there. watched as a coyote stepped foot on the United States soil, and legally the folks I was with, the Border Patrol, couldn't do anything. The family got off the boat except for one, and then the coyote said in Spanish, "You don't forget her." Well, she was under the age of 8, and this administration allowed, if you come in with the kids under the age of 8, nobody has to register. So what are you going to have? You're going to have trafficking kids under age 8. So, they get, oh yeah, we got her. But that's why you're finding children in the ditch, in the valley, because these families, they're not their kids and they've been sold. And as you mentioned, the atrocities the evil things being done to these children, and women and pretty much everybody by the cartels. Again, they control all of it.
They do.
We need to exercise our intelligence capabilities, our DEA, our FBI, and our military, to take them out. And so one thing I did mention to the FBI director and the director of the DEA, who has a family, I said, by taking the oath to do what you're doing, you are now a target. And I think it's to be admired, no matter what disagreements or things that we might have in difficulties we have. If you're in law enforcement at that level now, you are a target for cartels, international organized crime, foreign militaries. And I think that, this director or administrator of the DEA, tough lady. And they take their job very seriously.
So you think she gets it?
She gets it. So is
Okay.
the FBI director. And I think this is kind of these law enforcement agencies' way of saying, yeah, we get it. And so I asked them both about the AUMF. They weren't opposed to it, because they know it's time. And I just wish that whoever's running the show at the White House would understand that it's time.
Reaper drones are really effective. Just saying. Just saying.
So are SEALs. So are
Yeah.
Green Berets. So are F-18s. Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're real effective. So just saying.
Now you do run into, so I mean, the mere threat of it, I think, would bring AMLO. That's the common. That's how everybody addresses the president of Mexico. He needs to just take it seriously. If you can't take it seriously, well, we don't want more refugees coming up through the border. But at this rate, we've got to come up with something else.
That's another one from our previous conversation, where he's jumping in bed with the communist Chinese about against us, basically getting their influence in their country, and basically talking crap. But I want to move into domestic issues before I let you go. You have the debt ceiling fight that you're in the middle now. You passed a bill last night.
Yep.
It was a squeaker. It was
Yep.
a squeaker, but it passed. And can you speak on what passed and the probability of the Senate even taking it up?
Oh, well, okay. So it's called the Limit Save Grow Act of 2023. And it says if we're going to raise the debt ceiling, we're also going to cut back on what we spend. We're at 31 trillion and counting. And as a percentage of GDP, it's 130%, 125 to 30%. That hadn't been seen since 1946. So that's not sustainable. And so, the Republican House, all spending bills originate in the House. The debt ceiling is going to be hit perhaps in June, probably sooner, because the Treasury Secretary has said we're not receiving the tax receipts we expected, which is not to be understood in a time of an economic slowdown, which are policies instituted by this administration. So we could hit it earlier. So if we're going to pass a debt ceiling increase, which makes everybody absolutely furious at this level of spending, me too. But the alternative is if we didn't pass something out of the House to the Senate and put their feet to the fire, because they thought they could get by with a clean debt ceiling increase. And when I say that, I mean no cuts, continuing on the massive spending spree of 2024. Instead, what we're trying to do is go back to fiscal year 2022, which is the numbers we were spending up until 4 months ago. And the left is howling as if the world is going to come to an end. No, we're driving towards a cliff. They didn't think we'd pass it because we only have a 222 majority. So we only have a 4-seat majority from the 218. And they didn't think it would pass. In fact, what really ticks me off, they got some veterans groups to claim that we were cutting back on veterans benefits. That's a flat out lie. And I resent and will not stand by as people use me and my brothers and sisters as veterans to use them as political tools to ensure that we can spend money like it's going out of style. That is flat out, that's a lie. You start lying about veterans benefits, and we already said we're not cutting back on veterans benefits, Social Security, Medicare, or defense spending. Now, if you ask me, we could cut out one ring of the Pentagon and be just fine, meaning all the staffers and all the generals that we have so many of. But, you know, frontline weapons, training, things like that, we're not going to cut back on that. But they're not telling the truth. So back to the subject at hand, we're going to cut spending. Remember, and so for a primer for those listening who don't understand this, and I will probably tell you, most people don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's, you know, it's my job to educate and inform, lead, and represent. Every dollar that the federal government spends, you have mandatory and discretionary. Mandatory is there's been a law that's passed that costs this much, that no matter what you do in Congress, that law is already passed, we're spending this much every year. So out of every dollar that is spent by the federal government, 70 cents are mandatory, meaning it's already done, it's already spoken for, it's already out the door. So what does Congress, through the appropriations process, which is the committee I'm on, we only get to deal with 30 cents of that. So of that 30 cents or 30%, half of that is defense spending. So now you're down to 15 cents that you can cut off of, and we're not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. So now that even narrows it further. So we've got a very small amount of money that we can cut back on. Well, we've got COVID funds sitting in the bank that have been sitting there for 2 years. That's going to save up to 50 to 60 billion. Our spending, we're going to draw down on over the next 10 years, will save us $3.6 trillion. That's still a big number. I don't care who you are or how long you've been up in DC. We're going to defund the IRS army that Biden wanted to build with 87,000 new IRS agents to go after middle and lower class people who are just trying to make ends meet. And we're going after the Green New Deal grift. We're going to save $1.2 trillion on this Green New Deal stuff. If you'll notice, your electricity prices have gone up. That's because of reliance on, in a lot of places, renewables, or so-called. What that means is it's wind or solar. And, you know, when it's really, really cold, wind doesn't blow most of the time, or the sun doesn't shine all the time. So it's not dependable. And then we have to fire up the gas plants. So what we're going to do is have a much better, we'll cut back on those incentives, because that's costing the American taxpayer at the end of the day anyway. So you, the taxpayer, are spending money so that you can have renewable energy at a higher cost. So you're getting double tapped on this, and it's not dependable. That's why that's why California has brownouts, and people say our grid is under assault. Well, not if we use all the full length of nuclear energy, gas powered energy generation, renewables. That's fine. I think they're ugly. I'm from the Panhandle, and you know, they're killing a lot of animals. That's another subject. But anyway, we're back to what we're trying to save as I go down that rabbit hole. But we're also going to the loan giveaway, which is illegal and unconstitutional. It was a vote grab, and even the courts already stopped it. That's going to save $465 billion. Why would anybody not want to be for that? So along with that, we're going to have to do a debt ceiling increase. And the reason for that is, if you don't raise the debt ceiling, which this ship has been going this direction for a long time, well before I got here. So this is an aircraft carrier going 30 knots, heading towards the waterfall. You can't come to a full stop and turn it around instantly. It's going to take time. And we've been headed down a bad path. I mean, and both the previous administrations did this. Right. COVID did this too. So they've
all been spending.
Yeah, a huge spending spree. So it's going to take time to turn that around. So if we default on our debt, and as you mentioned earlier, what do the Chinese want to do with their yuan? They want to make it the reserve currency. They have some of our debt too, by the way. So if we default on our debt, that opens the door for the Chinese to have complete control of the world economy. And for those of you who have enough to put into a 401k, and we default on our debt, watch what happens to any stocks you may have, and your 401k is now useless and worthless.
So
Or if
go
we
ahead.
do raise it, but we get a clean debt ceiling increase, that will just be terrible. So we have to hold their feet to the fire. So I hope that was a good primer for people listening.
Oh, definitely. Well, before I give you the mic to speak to your constituents, um, that this debt ceiling fight, what if Biden says no deal? I'm not playing with you guys. I'm not gonna negotiate. What are you prepared to do? What would Jake Ellzey vote on? Congressman Jake Ellzey.
That's a good question. There's a lot of different answers to that one, but he will. And remember, he told the first two bills we passed out of the House. One of them was from about the DC Washington DC trying to lower their threshold for or penalties for crime. He said he'd veto it, and he signed it. And that was from Andrew Clyde from Georgia, probably the last guy most people would assume that Joe Biden would sign a bill by. And Andrew's a great guy, but he's very, very conservative and a Freedom Caucus member, and this was his bill, and Joe Biden had to swallow his pride and sign it. So he's going to come to the table. Otherwise, anything that happens next, both of which are terrible, is on him. So we've done our job. And now the Senate has to do theirs, but I think this is going to come down to Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden, or whoever it is he's going to be negotiating with, and they'll come to the table. They did that as a scare tactic to make themselves think that we wouldn't get this done. And when I graduated from college, what nobody's ever asked me since? What was my GPA?
Yeah.
So 217 to 215, we still won, and we thought we were going to lose. And I'll say this on that: Kevin McCarthy brought everybody on board. Everybody had a say. We have a bunch of disparate groups in our party, in our conference. We are independent thinkers. We don't have groupthink. That's what Nancy Pelosi had. She could whip them all into shape, and they all did what she said. We have independent thinkers, many of them who are veterans, who have fought for the right to think for themselves, like me. I think for myself. But we also have a team mentality and going, we know we have to get this passed. We're going to negotiate this here and there. Everybody's going to have a say, though. We didn't lock anybody out. So everybody from both ends of the spectrum in our party had a say in this. And that's a true testament to leadership on how Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise and Elise Stefanik and Tom Emmer got everybody together and said, let's get this done. And I think down the road, what happened last night will be nothing short of historic, because we haven't passed anything like that since 1994.
Wow.
So we're doing our job. Now the president has to do his.
So now is the point in the show when I let you talk to the people of Ellis County. Sorry to let you talk to the people of Ellis County directly.
Oh, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, the privilege, and the honor of representing you in District 6. And what we've talked about here today are some things that are, quite frankly, scary. You worry about your kids in school. You worry about the safety of your communities. Even if it's not your community you're worried about Oregon. You're worried about Chicago, the things that are going on there, gang violence, how many people are dying by fentanyl, the threats overseas. We must show strength. We can show strength. We have to show strength. 2024 is extremely important. Ecclesiastes 1:9 says there's nothing new under the sun, and God has plans for us. We are the bright, shining city on the hill. In 1979, we went through very much the same thing. And some of the folks who listen to you, I don't know, DV, what do you think? Is everybody old enough to remember 1979? Probably not, but many of them do. And at that time, we had a president who showed weakness. So the Iranians took our embassy in Iran, kept them for 444 days. We had an energy shortage that didn't actually exist, but we had lines wrapped around the gas stations. We had the president putting solar panels on the roof of the White House. We had a so-called national malaise, and many people thought it was Armageddon. We had socialist and communist sympathizers within our own government. Does that sound familiar? We've been through this before. Unfortunately for us as human beings, we can't pass along our memories to our children as we raise them. People, unfortunately, have to make the same mistakes. I think we have made some mistakes, and I think we've seen the error of our ways. 2024 can't get here fast enough, but it's going to get here. If you are a person of faith, keep that faith and understand that if God's got it, he's got it, and there's no reason to fear. Fear makes us make bad decisions. Fear makes us make bad selections in elections. let's be optimistic about the future. And the person that I'm going to be looking for in 2024 is someone who believes our best days are ahead, because I do, who has a strong faith in God, because we do, who believes that our nation is just getting started, because it is. Don't give up the faith. Keep your hope in man, but faith in God. We're going to come out of this okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sorry, Scott, I kept them a little longer than we were gonna, but we were getting some good information. Congressman, every time you come on my show, we go longer, but you get that information out to the people, and that's what I want. I want that information out. So, thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, you're welcome. We should do this. We can do this anytime you want to. I really enjoy going on your show. You and I have a kindred spirit on the veteran issue and our military and service to our country. And I'm happy to come on anytime. And I'm going to work hard to get some other folks that are colleagues of mine up here to get on your show. So for those of you who are listening, this guy does a great job. He cares about his country, cares about his community. And I'm going to see who all I can scare up to get on the show. So I would urge you to email, or however you get in touch with DV LeBron. Find out who you want to hear. We've got a good bunch of people. I want to leave you with one thing. I'm involved in 3 different Bible studies here, bipartisan. There are more good people up here than you can shake a stick at. The media doesn't make money on showing those people on TV. So when you see something on TV and said we're at each other's throats, I've never seen so much as a shouting argument up here. Don't believe it. If it bleeds, it leads, and it sells. Don't believe it. This country is better than you imagine. And the people representing you are good people for the most part. So don't give up hope on that, okay?
Well, Congressman, again, thank you so much for coming on. Can you stick around for a second after the show?
You got it.
Thank you.